All right, Jamie, thank you so much for your time and coming on to the Basketball Performance Podcast.
My pleasure.
Jamie, just before we dive into all the questions, can you give us a little bit of background on yourself and how you first got into the sports performance industry and what you're currently doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's work backwards. So right now, I'm the founder and head sport prep coach at the U of Strength. We are small, kind of general sport preparation facility in Kingsborough, Massachusetts, which is about 35 minutes north of Boston. And it's the typical story where, as a college athlete, played basketball and ended up, injuring myself, and 4 knee surgeries later, ended up inside a weight room. Got some great, mentorship and guidance. And then from college was able, to get into the private sector. And as most people know, Mike Boyle, he's in the States, he's a pretty well-known name in the strength and conditioning industry. Was able, to, get my feet wet, so to speak, and internship and work, in his program. And then from there, had a great opportunity and went to the University of Connecticut. And I want to say when I was at UConn, and for those that aren't familiar, with kind of UConn from a basketball standpoint history, it's an unbelievable program. And I'm from Connecticut originally, so I am a I'm a UConn super fan. And to be able to assist, to be able to be a part, of their development and their preparation, it was unbelievable. And it was the year where it was the last year of the real Big East. It was that 5 days, 5 games, 5 wins, straight run through the NCAA tournament, and we won the national championship. So it was literally, it changed my direction in my career. It was just an awesome opportunity. And basically I coached under Chris West. So at the time he was the head strength and conditioning coach for men's basketball, men's soccer, and women's soccer. So I helped him. Basically I was his right-hand man, and whatever he needed, I did. And it was just such a fantastic opportunity. And then from there, so at the time, my girlfriend, now my wife, we decided to kind of move back up to the Massachusetts, Southern New Hampshire area. And that's kind of the U of Strength started, started to grow. So right now, like I said, we're in Kingsborough, Massachusetts, and we work with, I think context is important. We work with 5-year-olds to the professional level and everyone in between. I would say the most is kind of that middle school, high school age, where it could be basketball, it could be a BMX, it could be downhill skiing, it could be a wide ranging of sport and, skill levels. So where our primary focus is on kind of motor learning and skill acquisition from the general side of things. But yeah, that's where I'm at now.
So you have a great deal of experience working with basketball players. From your experience, what are some of the physical qualities that basketball players might be lacking, just in general?
Yeah, so I like to simplify things, and I like to take a lot of, because especially for if there's an upcoming coach kind of listening to this, or there's just so much information, there's so much knowledge, there's so many rabbit holes you can go down. And so from a physical standpoint, I like to look just simple, from a force standpoint, and kind of breaking into, we got the force potential side and the force expression side. And what I mean by that, force, the force potential side is the maximum amount of force, a kid can display with their current physiological abilities. And so that could be force production, which everyone knows about. That could be force acceptance or force absorption. That could be force transmission. And so what I think, especially from a basketball side, and I don't, you can say basketball, you can say soccer, you can say whatever from a developmental standpoint. Again, middle school, high school, that force acceptance side is always lacking. And getting kids to understand how to accept, and there's a million and one ways to do it, but getting kids to accept and absorb that force, I think it's underutilized. And it's something that we have seen amazing things, just teaching kids to be able to dampen the forces, to be able understanding pre-tensioning, but being able to accept, the force is just such a huge thing.
Mm. And I would think that it plays a big role when it comes to injury reduction as well.
Absolutely. Because the beautiful thing with when we're training, these, and to try to, keep it simple, whether it's like a depth drop, or, even some of these rudimentary kind of extensive plyometric, activities. So when we get a kid to kind of land off that box and be able, be able to stick the landing or accept that landing and be in full control of it, you're desensitizing some of that neural inhibition. You're allowing the GTOs, the muscle spindles, to kind of say, hey, okay, we're not in a threat. Because I think a lot of times these kids, they get so fast, they get so strong, but they don't know how to use it. They don't know, how to express it. And that's my first step, is teaching them to accept it, to say, hey, we're not in a threat. This is not, this is not dangerous. And we do so, in different planes of motions at different velocities with different tools, etc. But yeah, force acceptance is something, that is it's a focal point throughout the entire program. It's not just in the first 2 weeks. We kind of microdose it and kind of throw it in throughout the entire training process.
Right. So I think a lot of coaches have this thought process and questions, and we can always learn more about this. But how do we go about combining sport-specific qualities with possibly small-sided games with the athletes, as well as combining what we do into the weight room?
Yeah. So I think, again, to simplify it, I like to create themes. And how we do, what we do in the weight room. It's a holistic approach. So we try to complement. So, if we're out, whatever we're doing on the field or court, we're complementing that, inside the weight room. So it's not just random and chaotic and nuts, because we do. And if people go and see, some of my work, it looks chaos. It is chaos. It is fun. It's not pre-planned, but we have a theme. We have an objective. And, depending on that, will kind of guide me. But I think it's really important that, especially from in whatever you want to call me, strength and conditioning coach, sport performance coach, general preparation coach, whatever, we get married to our methods. We get married to our program. It's on the sheet. We got to do it. And no, you don't. And so my program is very dynamic. It's very agile, where it's constantly changing. It's flowing, interacting with the athlete. When the athlete first steps in, the next minute they could be a completely different person, so yeah, we have themes, we have things that we want to emphasize, and then we go from there.
Well, can you give me an example of the theme? Like, can you give me an example of the theme that you're talking about?
Yeah. So, if the theme, if we're, all right, so let's give context, right? So let's say, we have a high school, say we have a senior, the kid's been a part of our program, for 4, 5, 6 years. So he has experience, we'll have how we kind of manage the, from a bigger picture, is that we have low days and high days. And what I mean by low day, it's basically, the stressors, we follow a low high approach. And so inside the weight room, if it's a low, then outside it's going to be a low. And same thing, if it's a high stress day, it will be a high on the on the field. With that, if inside the weight room, say it's a high CNS stress day, if it's more, if you want to call it max effort, but where it's a little bit slower, if you want to say strength emphasis, then out on the field and court, it's going to be similar. So maybe that's more acceleration work. Maybe, that's a smaller space, or maybe that's more of a smaller space. If, say it's inside the weight room, it's more of a dynamic effort, or it's a faster, where the bar, the weights, whatever the movements are more about speed and velocity, then maybe outside, on the field, maybe it's a bigger space where we're giving them an opportunity to try to hit some of those top speed qualities. Or maybe it's like a flying 10 with our speed work. So all I'm trying to get at is we try to complement what we do outside, what we do inside. And then on the low days, that's where we use our gameplay. That's where we give, basically complete autonomy, and allow, and I don't care if it's a 5-year-old or a 20-year-old, we're all human beings. All right. And being able to recharge, being able to, develop not only the physical, the psychological, the social, the emotional, I think is a missing component in a lot of people's programs. And games are one way we do to kind of, whether it's developing it or honestly just kind of recharging, those different systems. But that's where kind of if it's a low day, low stress, inside the weight room, we're doing gameplay, inside the weight room, outside the weight room. But again, we're trying to complement what we're doing.
So if I'm hearing this right, you're kind of pulling the organism into the same direction rather than in different directions. Is that right?
Exactly. Because we do so many different things.
Right.
There's so many different things we do throughout a session. And for me as a coach and for the athletes, it can be, it's a different process. And so getting these kids, to understand, getting these kids, to be part of the process, I think in my mind can change, right? But as of now, everything is, we have, themes, we have things we want to emphasize. And then within that, we have basically what we do is we have training menus. We have all these different options and stuff, where, we just want to make sure it's complementing one another.
Right. And when we think about strength and conditioning, I think a lot of us think about force production, which is obviously something that's very important when it comes to training any sport. But oftentimes I think that athletes and coaches, we get maybe tied a lot into chasing numbers rather than getting certain results. What's your thoughts on building a good amount of general strength, but at the same time, being able to ensure that what we do in the weight room actually transfers out onto the field?
Yeah. And so you said it right. And, kind of in the question, it's that we just can't be married to numbers, and we can't be, tied to tradition. We need to see, I'm a big believer on, meeting the kids where they're at, and finding what works. And if it doesn't work, put your ego aside and say, okay, we need to rethink this process. We need to change it. And I think that we're so, from a strength and conditioning side, we do it this way. It's my way or the highway mentality. And it is what it is. And if your numbers go up, I did my job. And use my language, but that's bullshit. It's not. We can do much more, especially from the developmental side, the younger side. We can do much more, and that's what I'm trying to do. Trying to bridge that gap and say, hey, and it's not that we don't lift. We still lift, and we have kids, that are, deadlifting and squatting and bench pressing and doing all of these traditional, these traditional exercises. But at the same time, we are doing other things as well. And it's kind of having, again, this holistic approach saying, okay, just because your squat went up, that doesn't mean anything. Can it, and so that's where kind of, some of these problem solving, our plyometric activities, or, some of these more coordination activities, our gameplay, our med ball throw, that's where all these things is. I'm just trying to bridge that gap from, what they're doing inside the weight room to what's expected of them on the court, right. And just trying to make that transition much easier.
Right. Well, I'm going to give you a plug because you have 2 awesome ebooks, which I have purchased myself, one called Gameplay 1.0 and the other called Agility 1.0. Can you give us a little background on these books? How did you first come about this kind of training, and how did you start experimenting with it? And how did you go about diving a little bit deeper into it?
Yeah, so about 5 years, it's been about a 5-year process. And it basically, all of these kind of ideas, these concepts basically started with change. And it started when, I opened up my own facility, because prior to the U of Strength, I lived in ice rinks, and I basically would jump from 3-4 different ice rinks, all within kind of like a 20-30 mile radius, where I basically kind of use space in a corner, in a nook, at the top of an ice rink. And so when I was able to finally open up my own facility, I had more space, I had more opportunities. My creativity kind of sparked, but also at the same time, I had a kid, and my child, Hadley, I have a daughter, she's 5 years old, basically changed my world. Not only, as a human, as a parent, as an individual, but also as a coach. And basically my lens, was, strength and conditioning, powerlifting, track and field, to now my lens is purely on movement, purely on skill acquisition, motor learning, and just seeing her learn these different movements, and without me having to say anything, it just got me thinking, and it got the ball rolling. And for coaches that are interested in some of these environments, concepts, ideas, I made one change. I started very simple. I made one change, to our program, and I just watched and I observed and got feedback from the athletes. And then I made another change and another change and another change. And over a 5-year period, now, you see it in agility 1.0, gameplay 1.0. But it all started where I changed my lens, and I threw tradition aside, and I wanted to find what works and what, how I can make an athlete. When a parent comes to me and I'm saying, I'm helping your son or daughter, am I really helping your son and daughter? And now I can honestly say I am. Before, yes, they're getting stronger. Great. Yes, they're getting faster. Great. But that's all I was doing. Now, from physical, psychological, emotional, social, we're doing much more. And it's just with simple changes.
Because I think that you and I come from a similar background in terms of when we learn movement skills, we learn speed mechanics, all that kind of stuff. It looked very pretty, right? It looked very pretty. At some point, you and I obviously questioned whether this kind of stuff actually works on the field, right? That beautiful acceleration, the multi-direction, does that actually work on the field? Can you give me a idea of how you thought about it scientifically in order to come up with something like this? Because I think that it's just wonderful.
Yeah, it's just things, and again, it comes back to that interaction with the athlete, saying, okay, and that's a thing. It's especially when you work with younger athletes, let's be honest, whatever you do is going to work to a degree. Their bodies are, they're gonna get stronger, they're gonna get faster, they're gonna get bigger. That's just the human body, right? And so just talking with the athletes and saying, okay, yeah, we're doing this, but this doesn't happen on the ice, this doesn't happen on the court. And it just got me thinking where, okay, I need to kind of honestly go to game tape. And that's what I used to do with that, bringing, and I still do, but bringing, game tape in, watching hours and hours and hours of different, YouTube videos, just watching movement in these chaotic dynamic environments. And it's like, okay, that, high knee, or that perfect elbow angle, or that perfect head position, or that perfect foot placement, that never happens.
Yeah, right.
It very rarely happens. Why the hell are we telling these kids? And as they're marching like robots, we're barking out cues every step they take. Yeah. And it wasn't working, and it doesn't work. I'm sorry. It just doesn't. Yep. Our human body, we are systems upon systems, and it's not that simple. And so kind of diving down ecological dynamics, dynamical systems theory, constraints-led approach. And it's like, oh cow, there's a whole different ballgame. And so that's where it's like, I want to find things that we want things sticky. We want, if it's a skill, if it's a quality, if it's a process, we want it to be sticky. And what I mean by that is that whatever we're trying to teach, we want you to be able to apply it immediately in your sport. And it might take a day, It might take a year. It might take a month. It's not pre-planned, right? Because every kid learns and adapts at different rates, but we want it to be sticky and we want it to be able to stay with them the rest of their life.
Right. I'm going to give the listeners a little bit of input on why I think that Jamie's stuff is so good. Because for me, one of the biggest things that traditional types of speed training was missing was the decision-making component, the reaction component, and a certain type of visual reaction. So if you look at the perception action coupling, I need to be able to visualize or perceive something, and then I execute the skill. Whereas if I'm just taught the skill, pretty much, I don't want to say the most important part, but the part that precedes that skill is kind of missing. Is there a place, Jamie, where you still do traditional movement skills training on top of what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a thing. Again, we use everything, but you're completely. I just want to elaborate on that. I think that's completely right. Where we, from a physical preparation side, we focus on 50% of the equation. It's the output. Yep. What about that other 50%, the input?
Right.
And the sensory system, and the decision, the cognitive, the cognitive abilities. So I completely agree. But yes, we still, I will still do a march just so a kid can understand, okay, if we're going to knee punch or kind of have that hip lock, they have some idea, but it's not every session done the same exact way. And this is something we can go down, with kind of this repetition without repetition idea. Because I think that some of these more closed, more traditional movements, we can do it a little bit better. But absolutely, same thing with our speed training. We still do acceleration. We still do, kind of that curved, that curved speed pattern. We still do max velocity. We do all that stuff. It's not just the only thing we do.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you, and this is a question that I just thought of just now, since we're talking about vision, have you ever used a constraint where you might limit your vision in a sense that maybe you have them close one eye and do it, or they're alternating eyes? Can you give me an idea?
Because absolutely, we do stuff with eyes closed. We do stuff with dominant side closed, dominant side open. We've done stuff where if they can't control it, we'll put tape over their eye. Because and again, now some people will be like, oh, this is kind of woo woo, what have you. But I'm a big believer on getting athletes to use all of the sensory systems, being able to use the eyes, the haptic system, auditory, obviously not taste, not yet at least, but getting them, to use them to their advantage. Because when we're doing these speed activities or we're doing these problem solving / agility activities, allowing them to use their senses is going to give them more tools in their toolbox. And that's all I care about, is giving them these different movement solutions or giving them movement problems and allowing them, to figure out effective and ineffective movement solutions, and being able to use not just the eyes, but the ears and touch, using that to their advantage. It's a game changer. It literally is a game changer when it comes to game speed. It's so important.
Because when I first saw this type of training, one of the things that I was thinking about is when you're teaching your athletes to move, you want them to think more externally, right? Not really internally on like if it's an American football game and someone's chasing them down, they're not thinking about punching their knee up, they're thinking about getting away from the guy behind them. And that's kind of where I drifted away from the traditional blocked approach and like perfect looking movement. I'm just curious as to when you do this kind of stuff, do you ever get parents or athletes saying like, what are we doing, coach? Like, why are we playing these tag games for little kids? I want to be doing what the combine guys are doing and running 40-yard dashes and all that. How do you kind of respond to that when something like that is brought to the table?
Honestly, in my small little corner of the world, so to speak, in Tingsboro, Massachusetts, I run a very small, very intimate, and it's by design, program. And so we attract kids. So I don't spend any money in marketing. I don't spend any money in advertising. It's all word of mouth, 100% word of mouth. And so I was very lucky. I have had great kids, and they're, those kids have friends, their friends have friends. And so
Mhm.
it's just build and build and build to the point where honestly, I don't have to deal with that anymore because they know so and so trains, with the US strength. They know so and so, trains under the US strength. So honestly, at this point right now, and then occasionally, but all I ask when we have that first initial meeting, because I am old school in that way, where if we get a new athlete, we are taking 5 to 10 minutes to introduce, so I can introduce myself, and I can get to know them as a human. I say you got to be open minded, and I don't care if you're a basketball athlete, if you're mixed martial arts, BMX, soccer, football, baseball, whatever it is, you have to have an open mind. If you have an open mind, I am going to take care of you. And so honestly, at this point, I don't really get any pushback because kids feel it. The things that they're able to do now within a couple weeks, a couple sessions, a couple years, they're like, it's working. So why are we, why would we change it up, so to speak? But yeah, so we don't currently right now, we don't get any pushback. We just get honestly a lot of positive feedback. Because I think the kids, like we talked about before we started recording, and I don't care if it's a parent, if it's a teacher, if it's a coach, we put these kids in boxes,
Uh,
nice pre-designed boxes where they only have so much room, they only have so much autonomy, they only, they can only make so many decisions. Where when the kid comes in, we knock a wall down, or we put a door there, we put a window there, knock the wall down, put an addition on, build a mansion where they are the process. And it's pretty cool once kids are like, hey, I have a say in this. I am taking ownership of my development, and this takes time. And it's not going to be like a 10-year-old who's got full autonomy of the weight room or the field. It takes time, and there's a process to it. But it's those kids, it's unbelievable just to see the difference, from not for only from an athletic standpoint, but from a human standpoint.
can you give me an example of the types of autonomy that you'll give them? Say, for example, would it like how do you start building that autonomy where they get a say in what they're doing? Say, for example, they may need more weight room work, but they want to just play games all day. How do you balance it out so that they get a little bit of both, or they get
Yeah.
what they
So,
really need?
all of our programs take place, in a small group setting. So it could be anywhere, 4 to 8 athletes, and then we do train teams. So the team is it's a little bit of a different, ball game. But with our small groups, we get kids, we organize all of the groups to manage it. We organize all the groups, by age and experience level. But then within that, we have a ton of different, sporting backgrounds. But real simple, when a kid comes in, it's just giving them, so we have, like I said, we have those themes, and we have, okay, prior to the weight room, okay, we're going to be, because the thing in my facility, and this might change, as I expand and grow, I have a 2,000 square foot weight room, but I also have, 250,000 square feet of outdoor turf, indoor turf, basketball courts. I'm in a sports center. And so I can't be at two places at once. So kind of depending on the day, depending on the group, okay, if we're out in the field, okay, today is going to be, more of a speed acceleration day, and then giving them A or B, giving them A, B, C, D, giving them options based on what I think is appropriate for what they need in that, current moment. But it just starts off with A or B. What do you want to do? Okay, I want to do A. Okay, with A, all right, these are all the different constraints. Okay, you can choose from repetition to repetition, but every single time you go, you have to change some aspect of it.
Okay.
And so just slowly giving them a say in it. And that could just be simple to kind of give more context. If we're doing just a 5-yard acceleration, and we're going to be doing it, from more of a kind of a standing posture, Okay,
Mm.
right, you can start athletic stance. You could start split stance. You could start single leg stance. You could start with your eyes closed. You could have one eye open. You can, no arm action. You can have just moving one arm. So we start to build in,
Mm.
all these different options, these different menus, and we just slowly I start simple, A or B. And then we just keep building, building, and building until it's basically, okay, this is the theme. All of the different things, choose.
Right. That's a good segue into my next question, which is different starts, because obviously you can vary how you start things. How do you play with how you start the drill? Because obviously, if anybody goes and watches your gameplay 1.0, there's elements of lacrosse, there's elements of basketball, there's elements of different sports. How do you look at a sport and then determine how you may start a certain small-sided game?
Yeah. So again, it goes back to the sport, and it goes back to looking for similarities and commonalities and what underpins, the problems that emerge on a lacrosse field, on a basketball court, on a soccer pitch, on a football field, etc. And just kind of seeing in playing, with all of these different scenarios, all of these different situations. Because, whether it's the offense, so if we're talking about, an agility activity, or what we call problem solving activities, maybe it's the offense starts the rep, maybe the defense starts the rep. Maybe it's
Mm.
this is something really different. It's a battling start where they're inside each other's bubble, and what we mean by that is that you're an arm's length away, inside their space, and you guys, and they're battling. And they're,
Mm.
they're trying to gain leverage, they're trying to gain position. So think of it
Yep.
almost like a box out drill. And depending on, okay, who we create a starting workspace, whoever steps out of bounds first is the defense and the other guy's the offense. Or maybe it's more of a face-off in our games. Maybe it's more of a face-off start. So think of it in hockey or lacrosse where, maybe they have to start with their hands behind their back. There's a ball in the middle. And on the whistle, the first guy to gain possession of the ball, that their team or that person is on offense. So honestly, dude, it's just not, it's being creative and looking for similarities and then testing it out. And trust me, there's been situations where it's failed, it's gone the other way. But being honest with the kids, being upfront, being transparent, you actually learn. You learn from those, just like motor learning, from mistakes and failures and falls. You learn from those mistakes, and so the next time we make that situation better, we make that activity better, and the kids get to see it, they get to feel it, they get to be in it, then they get to say in it, hey coach, how about we start it in this way? Great, let's do it. I can't tell you how many of those ideas, probably 50% of those ideas are from interactions with the kids. It's not just me.
Right.
It's my right-hand man, Ryan Wood, who's been with me, since the start. And it's all of the great athletes I work with, they're saying, what about this? What about that? And, while we're briefing at the beginning or debriefing at the end, what if we did it this way? Great, make a note. Whether I put it in my phone, put it on a Post-it. Okay, yes, we'll try that next time. So.
One of the things that I thought was quite unique and actually caught my attention when I first started following you was the encouragement of taking contact during these small-sided games, which I think is imperative. And to be honest, at least with the population I work with which I work with a lot of different levels, but I do work a lot with girls, is that it's the ability to accept being able to take contact. How do you progress that into a drill, and what happens if there's someone who is a little bit reluctant to take contact?
So really simple, we start it right at the beginning. So right, our pre-training or warm-up, so to speak, we do this thing, we're always doing, some form of isometrics. And with all of our different isometric menus, one of them is where we use perturbations. And we get kids to be comfortable saying, okay, if you're in a kind of split squat stance or single leg stance, athletic stance, lateral squat stance, whatever, all right, is okay, the other person, so you're holding that, imagine you have a dowel, a PVC dowel, and that other person is just lightly, all right, trying to cause you to lose balance, trying to cause you to break shape. And so it's just getting them comfortable. Okay, I have an opponent. All right, they're inside my bubble. All right, they're trying to, they're trying to make me lose position. And then we just start to build with, say it's our landing prep where we do, different, just think of different types of landings or different types of decelerations where a kid lands, say they're just doing place ankle jumps, and then they drop, they do a reactive drop stance where they pull themselves down into, let's say, their weak side single leg stance. And we have a partner just add a little perturbation, whether it's with a utility ball, whether it's with their hand, whether it's with a blocking pad, but slowly making it a little bit more complicated or a little bit more complex, a little bit more difficult where, okay, now they got to accept that contact. And then we start to get into our games, or so like one of the best ones I like is the different crawling games we do, where you're trying to pull someone and you're trying to get them to drop to their knees, but getting them, that's been the most successful, is going from the pre-training and then putting these perturbations or mini collisions inside a fun environment, then allows us down the road to do some of these more chaotic, more with these perturbation starts where we're really getting kids to teach them to self-organize. We're getting these kids to stay composed and controlled under pressure. But yeah, it starts from there.
Right. And we were talking off air on this. Have you ever considered, or do you put any kind of external weight on the athletes if they're ever involved in these small-sided games?
So with, I believe it's the Lila, right? Isn't that what it's
Lila, or maybe like even a very light weight vest or a weight belt, or I don't know, a little ankle weights. I'm not sure. Like, do you ever use the?
So from our agility environments, our gameplay, we have not yet, and it's just purely from a logistics standpoint. But I think it's something that it's on a post-it in the gym. It's an idea, and to use it more from a fatigue standpoint to constrain them. But again, resistance, if you want to talk about from a speed standpoint or teaching a younger athlete, to be able to lower their center of mass, I think resistance does a great job of implicitly guiding them instead of my voice or my hands guiding them. The resistance does a great job. And that could be acceleration. That could be some type of change of direction strategy. But yeah, it's definitely interesting stuff. And it's something, as the program evolves and grows, I'll absolutely look into and experiment with.
Now we talk about constraints a lot, and there's different kind of constraints we can use, whether it's time-based, whether it's area. How do you know that you've constrained a drill just right? And how does a coach know if they're over constraining a drill?
Honestly, with me, so it's video analysis, me watching hundreds and hundreds of hours and getting feedback from the athlete. We know, and it's less now because it's like anything. You dive in something new, you want to do everything. And yes, I made one change to the program 5 years ago, but I made countless mistakes with trying to do this constraint and this and this and this and this and layering and layering and layering and layering. And it just was too much. And you'll know if as they're problem solving, it's just all of my kids, they're great. We have great individuals, but we have good athletes and we have not so good athletes. And if I'm watching and the good, the better athlete or the kid that is, a more effective problem solver comes to me and is like, hey, this isn't going to work. I know I did too much. I tried to do too much. And so honestly, I'm very big on the interaction with the athlete, getting feedback. And yeah, there's some times where, it's way too much. And there's times where it's not enough. And that's the beautiful thing of this is, okay, all right, how can we make this better? How can we guide them, a different way? But it all comes from the feedback from the athlete. And at this point now, it's just, I've completely simplified, some of those, task constraints, the rules of the game or the implements being used. It's a process.
Right. And one of the things that I found that was the most, it really spoke to me and was a complete game changer is how you can vary these different drills to target, say, different energy systems. So if I'm going to do, say, for example, a 5-second drill that targets a certain energy system, if I'm going to do it for a minute, it's a different energy system. So therefore, these games and these small-sided drills can have different functions and what I'm trying to do, even though it could be the same game. Can you talk a little bit about that? And can I be putting these games at the end of a workout for more of a cardiovascular effect? Can I be putting these games after a heavy squat as a contrast? Give us a little idea of how you can vary these drills when it comes to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a lot of, if you want to call it a finisher,
Yeah.
I think post weight room, post resistance training, I think that gameplay I think that's where it can honestly be its most powerful. And so what we call it reboot activities. And what I mean by that is that after we do, say a heavy deadlift or a heavy bench press or more traditional means, from my perspective and the feedback and some of the simple, objective data we collect is we down regulate the nervous system. We down regulate some of the reflexes, some of these coordinated pathways. And so very simple, after say whatever, a heavy trap bar deadlift or split squat, whatever, we will implement simple, whether it's juggling or whether we go out and we play, a variation of dodgeball or spike ball. Spike ball is a huge thing and it's simple. I have 6 spike ball nets and, I have, several at the gym, several at my house. That's a simple one we do, but using it as a reboot, and to kind of recalibrate, so to speak, the nervous system. That's been something that, I don't talk as much about, but it's a staple, and it's something that, logistics plays a role because it is a business and I am running group after group. But if I have 5 minutes, okay, these are the different options compared to if we have 20 minutes, can we get outside on the field? Can we not? So all these different logistics play a role in it, but yeah, we use them as reboot activities. As far as an energy system standpoint, that's where, you can, play around with these different constraints where if it's a smaller space, kind of messing around with how many, how many teammates, how many opponents, or say you only have 2 athletes, are we going to put obstacles in there, to force more change of direction, to force, to increase the time of the rep. Or if we're going to open the space up, if we're doing a 4v4, all right, we want to, make the rep longer again. Okay, let's take some athletes away. I don't look from an energy system standpoint. I allow that to merge. I don't micromanage that anymore. I want the, if the rep's going to be 8 seconds, so be it. It's going to be 8 seconds. And it's a problem that the athlete's going to have to solve. If it's something that we are doing prior, to the weight room, or we have other things we want to get done, then I take that into account. I don't want to over stress or fatigue, because I want to make sure if we're hitting, apply metric, or we're, doing a heavy, you name the barbell movement. I take that into consideration, but it's not like, okay, if I design an activity and okay, I want it to be 5 seconds. If it goes 7 seconds, do I stop it? No, I let it, and I allow the kids to, to find a solution for that given scenario.
Understood. Well, thank you, Jamie. Thank you so much for your time. I learned a whole lot. And for anybody who doesn't know or doesn't follow Jamie, I highly recommend you guys follow him. Jamie, where can people find more information about the awesome work that you're doing?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much, Will. And so on the social platforms, it's just at the US Strength, and then the usstrength.com, and then email the usstrength@gmail.com. And I have an open door policy when it comes to all these different platforms. So please reach out if you got questions, if you got comments, if feedback, positive, negative, I accept everything. because I know it's very different, it's very foreign. But this is something that, you know, it's allowed us to have a conversation. And this is fantastic. You know, you're on one side of the country, I'm on the other side, and it's allowing us to talk shop. It's allowing us to bridge the gap, you know, between the sports side, the strength and conditioning side. And I think that's so important. We got to stop operating in silos. And I don't care if you're coaching your youth daughter's basketball team, or you're a major Division I basketball coach, or you're a strength coach in the NBA. We all, you know, need to meet. We need to all, you know, meet somewhere along that bridge, so that we can provide the best, you know, the best service to these kids, to these humans, to these athletes. So I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Again, guys, if you're not following him, go right now and follow him and the 2 products that he has, Gameplay and Agility 1.0. I am a customer of his, and I highly recommend that you guys pick it up, because I've been able to add so much into my programs, and my athletes, Jamie, just to give you feedback, love it. And it's way better than the traditional block stuff that we do. People look forward to movement skills now. They can't wait to get into that movement skills part. It's competitive, it's dynamic. So again, thank you for coming on the podcast. Just hold the line, and guys, we will see you next week.